Very good afternoon. Pasensya na po, I was not able to attend this morning's opening. Siraan po. Anyway, so, okay, as you can see, we already have a draft roadmap, which we call Inclusive Innovation and Entrepreneurship Roadmap, the aim of which is to help the country transform our economy in this new digital age. So I divided the presentation into two parts. In part one, I'd like to discuss first the Inclusive Innovation Industrial Strategy, or IQS, to provide the overall context and as well as to enable us to link our innovation objectives with our industrial policy goals. And then we will proceed to our inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship roadmap. I'll be presenting to you the vision, where do we want to go and how do we get there. And this is based on the regional consultations that we did, along with the innovation assessment studies that USAID STRIDE has funded. So, okay. Just to show the macroeconomic performance, I really usually start with the overall performance of the economy. So as you can see, this is the GDP growth for China, for Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And the purple line that you see, that's for the Philippines. And I'm happy to report, I'm sure everybody knows about this, that from 2010 to 2017, we posted an average growth of 6.4%. And this has been happening amid global and economic uncertainty. And hence, we could really say that Philippines has been growing remarkably. And for 2017, our growth rate was 6.7%. Which is higher than Malaysia, higher than Indonesia and Thailand, and closely following Vietnam's 6.8% and China's 6.9%. And so because of this impressive growth, the Philippines is being seen as Asia's new economic fighter. And much of this growth has been driven by manufacturing. And below, you can see the chart giving us the industry growth, again, of the same 7 countries. The purple line, that's for the Philippines. The orange line is for Vietnam. And for 2 years, 2013 and 2014, the Philippines actually registered the highest growth compared to the other 5 countries. And when you look at our manufacturing performance in 2016, we posted a growth rate of 7%, and this is actually third, and we're behind Vietnam, which posted a growth rate of 11.9%, and then you have Singapore, which is the yellow bar that you see. But for 2017, from 7%, we grew 8.6%. Vietnam, however, still number 1 at 14.4%. Well, this gives us the growth of the different sectors in the Philippines. The red line is for agriculture. The yellow or orange line, that's for manufacturing. And then services sector is the maroon line. And again, if you try to compare 2000 to 2009, it was actually services that was driving the country's growth. 5.2% average, 3.2 for manufacturing, and 3.2 for agriculture. But in the next period, from 2010 up to the present, manufacturing is the leader at 7.6%, which is more than double the growth that we posted from 2000 to 2009. Services is now the second at 6.7%. and agriculture has been lagging behind at 1.4%. So within the manufacturing sector, it's actually the food processing sector which has been dominating with the largest contribution of 34% in 2017. The other sectors, other important sectors driving manufacturing consist of, this is an electronic sector, radio, TV, and communication, and then we also have chemicals, and then this one is furniture. Now, looking at the regional economic performance, you see here, the size of the circle, that would represent the contribution of the region to the economy. And then the farther away you are from the axis, that means you're really growing fast. But what do we see here? Based on this picture, what we can say is that there is a huge imbalance in our regional economic performance, with only 3 regions already accounting for 63% of our GDP. That's NCR, Calabar Zone, and Central Luzon. And many of our regions, particularly the poverty-stricken ones in Mindanao, have really very small contribution. So now looking at the structure of our regional economies, as you can see, many of our regions still depend on agriculture, and that's the reason why we see them really concentrated and with almost the same sizes. And when we look at manufacturing, again, it's largely confined in sectors like Calabar Zone, Central Luzon, and NCR. Now, services, again, a huge imbalance, because it's actually only the NCR where services accounts for 52% of its total regional growth, regional GDP, gross domestic product. And outside of NCR, services is really quite small. And so now we've looked at our internal situation. Like what we've said, Philippines is being seen as Asia's emerging economic tiger, but then poverty still remains. Poverty incidence remains high, particularly in regions like ARM, where you have 54, close to 54, that's 54, right? Close to 54% of the population are of the people are poor. You have Caraga with 39%, Eastern Visayas at 37%. Now, globally, what we witness is that we are already entering the 4th Industrial Revolution, which is going to be driven by disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence, robotics, big data, blockchain, and so on. And then we're seeing in the US, with the election of Trump, he pulled out from the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and then he has his policy is really to bring back jobs to America. And so now tariffs on iron and steel and other products are being raised, and apparently there's a brewing trade war. There's going to be a trade war, hopefully not, no, between China and the US. And in the EU, the UK actually also pulled out from the EU. So we have Brexit. And amidst all this, countries like China are actually preparing by implementing their own strategies. China has its Made in China 2025 policy. Thailand has Thailand 4.0. In India has Make in India. And in the Philippines, we have IQS. Okay? And so, looking at the impact of Industry 4.0 on the Philippines, the World Economic Forum, this is a very new report, says the readiness of countries with respect to future production. And their findings showed that in the Philippines, there's low level of readiness for future production, and hence we are at risk, according to the report. We are at risk of not being able to sustain this high-level growth that we've been experiencing. And the reasons that were cited were our weak institutional framework, our weak human capital, and weak technology and innovation. And the recommendation is for the Philippines to upgrade its technology platform, reskill and upskill its workers, and focus on innovation. Because innovation, I'm quoting from the report, is the animating force behind the future of production. So, ang tawag ko, invisible hand, si innovation. So, our I3S, our industrial policy, actually, its underlying framework is given by this relationship: competition, innovation, and productivity. And this is based on the external factors that we've already discussed, the configuration of our industries, and of course, taking into account also the internal factors like our government policies, quality of our institutions, infrastructure, etc. So we have this underlying framework with more competition leading to more innovation, and with more innovation, that is what is going to lead to productivity increases. And as you can see, the arrows are not just unidirectional, but they are bidirectional. So the higher your productivity, the more innovation that this is going to generate, leading to more competition. So here is our I3S, which, like what I've said, is going to transform the strategy that we need to transform the Philippine economy in the new digital age. And we're focusing on three major aspects, three major elements. One is that, of course, we're focusing on innovation and entrepreneurship. We're also focusing in terms of building new industries towards new industry clusters, as well as deepening our participation in global value chains. Our overall goal, number one, is to build the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem, remove obstacles to growth in order to attract more investments, and strengthen our domestic supply chain in order to deepen our participation in global and regional value chains. And the role of government in all this is to act as a facilitator, as a coordinator in addressing the most binding constraints to growth, and create a proper environment that would allow private sector to grow and develop. And this is going to lead to our inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. Okay, so the buzzword here really is connectedness, which is also the theme of today's meeting. And at the foundation is strong government academic industry collaboration. And you can also see it through those three circles on the roof. And we've identified five major elements that what I've said we are focusing in terms of building new industries, new industry clusters. We're also looking at human resource development, how to upgrade our curriculum, skills training programs, as well as improve our digital skills, our digital capacities. And of course, for MSMEs, it's still access to finance, markets, skilled labor, as well as technology. Innovation and entrepreneurship would be focusing on building strong government academic industry linkages, with research being directed more towards the market, and the building R&D centers, providing innovation incentives, and so on. And the last one, very important, is ease of doing business, which pertains to the simplification of complicated processes and regulations in government, as well as, well, we need to address issues such as those on power, on high cost of logistics, and limited infrastructure, which we're, by the way, addressing through the Build for Build program. In terms of market orientation, the focus is not only, well, in the past it used to be that we were focusing our strategy in terms of promoting our export. So it was an export-oriented strategy. But this time around, we are changing this strategy in the sense that we're now focusing not only on the export market, but on both domestic and export market. We need to use our huge domestic market, which is we are over 100 million people, and we can use this actually as our springboard that would enable the Philippines to become a future regional hub. And then here are the 12 priorities for both the domestic and export markets. We have electrical and electronics, auto and auto parts, aerospace, IT, BPM and e-commerce, tool and die and iron and steel. We have chemicals, agribusiness, shipbuilding, furniture, garments, and the creative industry, tourism, transport and logistics, and construction. We've also tried identifying the very specific activities or subsectors within the industries that we've just described. Like I just mentioned a few. In electronics and electrical, we're focusing on R&D, IC design. We want facilities for advanced products and technologies like Internet of Things, robotics, drones, augmented reality, cognitive cloud, 3D printing, and in automotive, we're focusing on auto electronics, as well as ADAS components. ADAS is for the advanced driver assistance system. Aerospace, also aerospace electronics. These three are actually, no, these four are actually very much related. Electronics, auto, aerospace, and IT-BPM. IT-BPM, data, we have here, data analytics, engineering services outsourcing, legal process outsourcing, health information, and so on. So we now move on to our innovation report. Based on the Global Innovation Index, the Philippines ranked number 73. We are behind India, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Singapore. Although over the last 4 years, our ranking has gradually improved. In 2014, we were ranked 100, and this improved to number 74 in 2016, but not much improvement between 2016 and 2016. So from 74, we improved to 73. But if we look at the case of Vietnam, for instance, in 2014, the rank of Vietnam was 71, and in 2017, it jumped to number 47, and that's because they invested quite a lot in education. And then the report also indicated the different strengths of the Philippines. What are our weaknesses? So looking at our strengths, primarily it has to do with our exports of ICT services, along with our exports and production of high and medium tech manufacturers, particularly this would refer to electronics and electrical. Weaknesses would have, we have here on our list, education-related indicators. We are lagging behind, like number 113 in terms of education. Expenditure on education, we are number 106. Government expenditure per pupil, we are number 99. So again, we tried emphasizing these weaknesses because these are the things that we want to address in the roadmap in order to improve our innovation ranking. And actually the low scores were in the following aspects. We have limited creative outputs. Trademarks, this will comprise of trademarks, industrial designs, ICT and business models. Human capital also, we've seen the education indicators. Also in terms of market sophistication, we're not really doing well as compared to our neighbors. And hence, also, there's so much that must be done in terms of our ICT infrastructure. Although, of course, the ICT has a plan to address this. And also in terms of innovation linkages, our rank is number 95. Innovation linkages, this would refer to the linkages within the government as well as the linkages between government, academe, industry. And then, so this is just to share government research budget, how little it is. So from 2016 to 2018, these are the shares of government budget for research to the total government budget. So for 2018, government research budget is 0.44% of the total. And how is this allocated? We can see here that for R&D in 2018, DOST has the largest share, about 76% of the total. This goes to DOST. And in terms of our R&D education, it goes mostly to SUCS or to CHED with a share of 45%. And then for DepEd, it's 34%. So how is the budget allocated by the different agencies? DA, of course, has all these different projects, agriculture related. They have organic agriculture, climate change, biotech. They have a research program for high-value crops like rice, corn, and cassava. They also have a commercialization program. Now, if we look at CHED has all these grants, block grants, regular grants in a Industry 4.0 grants, and so on. Now, DOST has well, you know all this. I don't have to mention, but I'm particularly well excited about this Science for Change program. I'm looking at NICER, R&D leadership program, Cradle, and this. I think these are steps in the right direction. And why did I include BTI here? We're not actually providing any research grants, but BTI actually, the work that we do is really very much linked with industry, so with the market. And so I've listed here the different things that we do, like we have also shared services facilities. We have, this is, by the way, in most of the projects, these are in collaboration with DOST. And then the negotiation centers, the IPO field, of course, is an attached agency of DEI. We also organize events for startups, like the Slingshot. There's the Ripples also. This is for startups who would want to go to the export market. And then under BOI, we provide R&D incentives. This is under the investment priorities plan. Incentives for new industries, new technologies, as well as BOI's work really dwells a lot in terms of industry development and roadmaps. So looking at the different research programs, there is one particular aspect that we've observed based on the interviews and the consultations that we had, was that there's really not much work in terms of conducting market studies. And so when we look at the linkages also of the different government agencies, you can see these broken linkages because we are not interacting, except for DOST and DTI, wherein you have this very, it's still not a full line, but you have that. But that's because we already have MOUs, and this morning there was another MOU signed. So whereas compared to the other institutions, there's really very limited coordination. And as a result of that, of course, the ecosystem is really fragmented and with lots of missing players and stakeholders. And then based on these 4 studies, 2 by PIPS and 2 by USAID's right, major conclusion is that there's a weak linkage between academia and industry. I won't mention the other very detailed findings, but in general, that's the main finding of these papers. Okay, we mentioned that already. So what we did, remember, in 2016 we had the manufacturing summit, and we invited Dato Banatao as our keynote speaker. And it was in 2016 when he said that he encouraged us to work closely together, DTI and DOST, to lead the formulation, of the roadmap, as well as to lead the establishment of inclusive innovation centers. So that was in November 2016. So in 2017, we organized the Inclusive Innovation Conference, where we signed the MOU between DTI and DOST for both agencies to formulate the Inclusive Innovation Roadmap and work closely together in implementing and monitoring the roadmap. So in the succeeding months, what we did was to conduct really regional consultations across different regions in the country. And okay, so we went to five regions, Manila, Cagayan de Oro, Cebu, Davao, and Clark. But in these 5 consultations, we were able to cover 11 regions. We had about 450 participants coming from industry, academia, and the government. And based on the consultations, there's really very little knowledge, limited awareness in terms of what Industry 4.0 was. So, what we've seen is that there is, okay, so these are the major findings from the focus group discussions that we had. And across the different parts of the country, the regions are actually clamoring for the building of connected, creative, innovative communities. They want more R&D collaboration between industry and academia. They want legislations and policies that would strengthen R&D based, taking into account local needs, local industry needs. They are also pushing for the integration of innovation and entrepreneurship in our education curriculum, and improve the quality and utilization of government's shared infrastructure like SSFs, Fab Labs, and FIs, Food Innovation Centers. So what we're trying to do here is to link together our, why do we call it an inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem? These are 2 ecosystems that we see, and what we do is to link the 2 together. The innovation ecosystem is made up of the following, those are the different players. You have the service providers, you have research institutions, intellectual property, support organizations, funding, the big companies and the customers. And on the other side, we have the entrepreneurship ecosystem, which would refer to the following, that we have markets, culture because we want to find out how do people perceive risk, okay? And then you have the regulatory framework and infrastructure, education and training, support mechanisms, human capital, and workforce availability. So 3 things that we would want to emphasize. Number 1 is that with strong collaboration between and among government, academia, and industry, what we'll have would be a connected country. Second, with strong business and policy environment, we will be able to generate more jobs, we can create new industries, we can create new products, new processes, and this is going to improve our competitiveness and our productivity. And hence, that would lead to a more inclusive and sustainable growth. And then the last one is the continued creation of our talent pool. Okay, we need a critical mass of this creative talent pool, and altogether, this would lead to poverty reduction. So this is our vision. The vision, of course, is to create an inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. This. And this one, the first layer, this is our innovation ecosystem and the different layers. And then outer layer, this is our entrepreneurship ecosystem. And again, the focus is on building strong collaboration in order for us to have a connected country. We are strengthening our business and policy environment, which is important in order for us to really be able to create the innovation ecosystem. A creative talent pool is an essential element. Of course, we need incubation as well as bridging the gap, incubation of innovation and bridging gaps in innovation and entrepreneurship. Academic-industry partnerships to conduct not only basic research, but also applied and market-oriented research. Support by government is important, as well as private funders, and we need to involve our researchers and experts and industries across the country in order for it to become inclusive. And how do we do that? We've identified here 6 elements: innovation policy and commercialization. Commercialization is very important. And then industry clusters, skilled workforce, funding and finance, government, academic, industry network, and an entrepreneurship program, and making our SMEs more innovative. Again, this would summarize the different recommendations, major recommendations coming from the regions as well as from the studies by USH, right? Number 1 would be the technical collaboration between academia and industries. Number 2, human resource development and an industry-responsive curricula. Academic industry shared facilities for rapid prototyping and demonstration, testing equipment, R&D incentives. These are the various incentives that we can offer: tax credit, accelerated depreciation, R&D grants, and maybe we can also look into innovation vouchers, which is being done in other countries. Technology transfer offices, science parks, business incubators, and so on. And another important recommendation, of course, is to expand the MOU between DTI and DOST to include other government agencies such as DICT, DA, CHED, TESDA, NEDA, DOF, and EILG. And then we've also identified the major roles of these different institutions. Like we're looking at NEDA as the agency that would be responsible for our innovation policy, monitoring as well as the evaluation of the implementation of this policy. For DOF to continue providing support for innovation and R&D. DILG, it's very important that we link with our LGUs, and then shared for the more market-oriented research grants and commercialization support. The same is being applied to DA, as these are our major research granting agencies, as well as DOST. Okay, and then for DTI to contribute in conducting market studies and linking industries with academia and other government agencies. And for DICT to be in charge of the physical innovation infrastructure. So in here, we've also identified the different government agencies who would be responsible in terms of implementing and coming up with projects based on the different elements that we've discussed. And for my last slide, one big recommendation coming out really is for us to establish this regional inclusive innovation hubs. And we're looking at this regional and local inclusive innovation hubs as the cornerstone of IQS. They would bridge the gap between industries and academia, and they would also lead towards the creation of our regional innovation ecosystem. And this would be made up of universities, R&D labs, S&T parks, incubators, fab labs, co-working spaces, investors, LGUs, as well as startups, along with SMEs and large enterprises. We would like to focus, like what I've said in the beginning, on the priority sectors that we've identified, such as electronics, automotive, aerospace, chemicals, IT, BPM, and agribusiness. So for 2018, we've identified several activities this would be for this year. So we want the MOU signing to happen this year. So after the regional right now what we're doing is already the validation portion. The same presentation is what we're showing to the different regions, and we've actually finished one for NCR and Region 4 and 4A. And the next one would be in Cebu, in Cagayan de Oro, as well as in Davao, and then in Clark. We also indicated here for this year the revival of our Philippine Innovation Council. And we would like to pilot the concept of building regional inclusive innovation hubs in Calabarzon, in Cebu, as well as in Bicol. Although, of course, if there would be more regions that would volunteer to be part of the pilot areas, you are most welcome. Especially now, we're also talking to World Bank because World Bank is also interested in funding our innovation efforts. And I think they will be talking to DOST as well. But with DTI, they've already approved for us to conduct innovation assessment in Calabarzon, in Metro Manila, and in Cebu. And then for DTI to form a market research group. Of course, we need to continue coordinating with JED and TESDA. And then so for 2019 up to 2022, we will continue doing the work. Okay? So I think this would end the presentation. So this is our picture with the late Dr. Rico Torres. Dr. Brenda is here, Sec Mon, and Yusek Geb. Doc Mac is here, and Yusek Barba. Unfortunately, Sec Boyo said he want to come with us, but we've just placed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Asik Ita, for this very comprehensive presentation that will realize, hopefully in the very near future, this inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem that is very, very important in the journey of the Philippines to really grow in terms of grow in the development that we're all aspiring for. We will be entertaining questions later coming from the floor, but of course that's after we've listened to the second presentation on the topic of enabling partnership, and this will be presented to us by Dr. David M. Hall of USC Strive. Let's give it a warm welcome.
I have a chance to talk about one of my favourite subjects. I think it's really relevant. Peter mentioned a number of times the value of partnerships, of working together. I've spent most of my life trying to build partnerships and create partnerships. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about how to do those, how to do that. Some of these things I think you already do. My guess is that nobody does all of these things. Maybe collectively you do all of them. But what I hope to do is to spark some ideas about how in your regions you could set about building partnerships, partly between industry and university, but also partnerships between companies as well. Am I asking someone to click? These never work. Yeah, okay. So for those of you who don't know who we are, we've been kindly referred to a number of times today. Richard Abendon and myself. We run a program funded by USA, and Brian Levy was from USA, who was here earlier. We work for a company called RTI International, the logo in the top right, and so we're contractors to USA to run the STRIDE program here in the Philippines. STRIDE stands for Science, Technology, Research and Innovation for Development. We seek to spur inclusive economic growth by improving the quality, quantity and relevance of research in Philippine universities. Now for that to happen, it has to be driven by need and led by industry. Led by industry and driven by need, I can't quite remember which way around it goes. And so we've been going now for 4.5 years, and we're approaching the end, although I think we have an extension. But we're approaching the end. So we've been doing this in the Philippines for 4.5 years. We've learned a lot of lessons, and I'm going to try and pass some of those on, partly from what we've done in the Philippines, partly from some of my previous lives as well. Okay, so one of the things we did in the early days of STRIDE in 2013 and 2014, we did a study of the Philippine innovation ecosystem, or an assessment of the Philippine innovation ecosystem. And that report is still available on our website, the STRIDE website, still downloadable. I've still got about 200 copies in my office as well, I think. Okay, so I think we're getting some later on. It's quite a long thing, and I'm not going to dwell on what we did or the outcomes very much, but 4 main things came out of this, although I'm really only interested in one. So 4 main bottlenecks in the innovation ecosystem in the Philippines, kind of looking at it from a point of view, admittedly. The first one was procurement. It just takes a long time to buy things. I think you all know that. The way that grants and counterpart funding work in universities in terms of freeing up enough time for people to do research. The issue of revenue from research. Too much pressure to generate revenue in the short term from research rather than looking at the longer term benefits. But relevant today, one of the things that came out was about university-industry relationships. And the actual words that industry used on a number of times were that they do not trust the universities to do research. It's not that they don't trust them because they're dishonest, it's that they don't trust them to deliver professional results on time. Now I have to say that's not just a Philippine problem at all. It's a problem not nearly everywhere I've worked. Everywhere I've worked, it's a problem. So it's not a Philippine problem. And so there are solutions. People have worked on this all around the world. It is, without a doubt, a problem here. And it's one of the things that we set out in STRIDE to knock down. It's actually Richard's job. Yeah? But I got the job of standing there today. So, university-industry relationships. We've done a number of things here in the Philippines to try and strengthen those. And we've had a measure of success. And I'm going to mix some of those things in with what I'm going to talk about. To dig deeper into that, into university-industry relationships, these things came out. So there's mutual misunderstanding leading to mutual distrust. And that's because universities and industry have different objectives. They kind of speak a different language, they really do. I've worked in both, and there's terminology which doesn't mean the same thing in each sector. There are different ways of working. Of course, industry is driven by the bottom line, by profit, and universities are rarely driven by that. there are different measures of success, different incentives to collaborate, and I don't mind saying this here, there's nobody here from a university, is there? Safely saying this then, universities really, really do seem arrogant to people outside of universities, yeah? They can be arrogant and intimidating, even though they don't necessarily intend to be. So those are problems with universities and industry working together. Time. But there's also problems with companies working together. And we don't think about this quite so often, I don't think. And the reasons are not quite so clear. And to be honest, we haven't studied it in the way we studied the university-industry relationships. But if you're a company looking for another company to work with, either as a subcontractor or a partner or whatever, sometimes it's quite difficult to find the right partner. There's also mutual mistrust. And some of this is a very Philippine thing, if you forgive me. There's a great fear here of people stealing your secrets, yeah? And we found it in universities, and there's a lot of kind of protectionism, and unfortunately it doesn't work. You've got to kind of open up and share. But I come across it a lot, yeah? I don't know why, and I don't really care why, it's just an issue, I know that, yeah? There's limited collaborative experience. People haven't done it very much, and until you've done it, you don't get very good at it. So we're kind of trying to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps. In some places there's a physical disconnect. Your ideal partner could be a long way away or difficult to get hold of or whatever. And this is why it's important that you're from the regions, because regional collaboration within the region is very important, because physical connection is much easier. And so to start in the regions and grow outwards is a very sensible way of approaching it. There's also a poorly understood legal framework. We work a lot with the Intellectual Property Office, and I know the issues they have about trying to get an understanding out there of how IP works and what it's for, but also in terms of business relationships. And again, some of this comes back to protecting what's in your factory, and the issue of NDAs and such like. The biggest NDAs I've ever seen are here in the Philippines. Was it 17 pages to put a faculty member into a company? Yeah, bigger maybe. Most of the NDAs I've ever signed are like 1 page. Yeah? So these are the issues that we face. So how do we get around these? We have an approach in Stride, and I've had an approach in my life since when, about 1996, when I learned. I had an inspirational moment with one of my professors. The key to this is making friends, yeah? A lot of this is about lack of trust, not knowing your partner, not knowing what drives them, and not being able to work together. Now I learned this back in, I think it was 1996. I'd been working, I'm not American either, yeah? I'm from the UK. And I've been working outside of the UK, and I went back there to work in a university, and we got some money from the European Union to build a centre, not physically build it, to set up a centre to give assistance to manufacturing SMEs in the north of England. Yeah, it wasn't very fashionable for universities to work with SMEs then. We were just having a realisation that most of the industry out there are SMEs, a bit like, exactly like here, yeah? So I had a professor, I was quite young, had a professor, and we set up a system whereby we could give half-price consultancy to manufacturing SMEs to kind of help nudge them forward. And this was great, and we made a bit of money out of it as well, perfectly legally. Yeah? So we kind of produced some leaflets, we produced a way of paying people in the university, and we set up a regular Monday morning meeting with the two of us and our admin assistant, the secretary. And then we realised we didn't know any SMEs. And we had to get out there and find them. So how were we going to do that? How were we going to connect with SMEs? And it took us quite a long time to do it. And we found a lot of ways to do it, some of which I'm going to describe to you, in fact, that I've used ever since. But after a while, we were doing these little consultancies, like 1 day, 2 days, or whatever. And yet his task was to grow the research profile of the manufacturing departments in the university. And I said to him, one day we were sitting there, we were doing all these little jobs, and I said to him, his name was Dave, the same as me, I said, Dave, why are we doing this? You know, it's not really, we're supposed to be building a research profile. And he said, well really, we're just trying to make friends. And I didn't really understand at the time, but the point was, we were never going to do collaborative research unless we had enough friends to be able to pick and choose the best ones or do it when the right moment came along. And he was absolutely right. We did that for maybe, I worked on it for maybe 3 or 4 years, and it continued as I kind of moved elsewhere in the university. Over a period of, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, we made over 500 friends, 500 SMEs in the north of England. We had those on our database. And they were our friends. We could pick the phone up and say, can we come and see you tomorrow? And they'd say yes. Or if an opportunity for a project came along, we'd say, can we come and talk to you about this? Or we know that this SME was looking for another SME to work with, so we put them together. And we did get research projects out of it. We got PhD students out of it. And if we hadn't set out to make friends, we wouldn't have done any of that. So to me, the key to collaboration is making friends. It's a pity Yusek not here, because I once gave a talk about research partnerships, and she was there. It was about the first time I ever met her, in fact. And I stood on the stage somewhere, wherever it was, can't even remember. And the title of the talk was Research Partnerships. And the first thing I said was, look, forget research. Think about partnerships. Make those low-level friendships. So, that's what we've got to try and do. If you want to have friends, be friendly, yeah? Now, to be honest, in universities, they're not really used to doing this, yeah? Once you're inside a university, people tend to pick and choose their friends. We've learned not to. We'll be friends with anybody. It's the same on Stride. Be friends with anybody. You never know when that first contact is going to turn into something big. And you need lots of friends, and I'll show you why later. I'll give you a peek into my old office. Even you haven't seen that. So how do you make friends? You've got to create opportunities to make friends. And to me, just for the sake of simplicity for today, I've split them into 2. There are opportunities to engage, opportunities where you do engage, yeah? And opportunities to actually make the friends. Now, I'm going to run through some examples pretty quickly, and I'll split them into these 2 categories. Some of these things you're familiar with. So opportunities to engage exist through collaborative grants. And we heard about Cradle earlier from DOST. In Stride, we offered something called Carwin, which bears a striking resemblance to Cradle. But I can say that because you said it's not here as well. These are simply grants which encourage university-industry collaboration. You don't get a grant unless there's a collaboration. It requires an industry contribution, at least Carwin. I'm not so sure about Cradle. And it's a good incentive to offer something called innovation workshops, which I'll talk about a bit later. Again, I don't know too much about how Cradle works, but with Carwin, what we did was we would have a university and an industry working together with graduate students, yeah? And the idea is it's something to accelerate the company's work in commercializing something or improving a process, and the company pays some money. It's usually a 2-year program. It could be a 3-year program. There could be more than one associate. Thank you. And the associate could register for a higher degree, a master's degree or a PhD. I participated in a whole load of these. They're great ways to get faculty involved with industry, great ways to get industry comfortable with faculty, great ways to accelerate the progress of the associate, who could then go on and work for the company, and often that was the case. But again, one of the key things was Department of Trade and Industry provided an experienced mentor, usually a retired industrialist, who would kind of sit and referee fights between the university and the industry, try and smooth things over and make it work. You can Google this. Sweden are copying it, Australia are copying it. Not sure who else is. But this was great. It's one of the best things I ever worked on in terms of engaging partners. You've never heard of this, and this existed only for a few years. Recraft grants were something which ran in the north of England. I don't know why I'm talking about England today, it's not paid by the Americans. But regraph grants, they were small grants, and I can't remember, this was before the days of the internet, so there's nothing on the internet. These were small grants, 10, 20,000 pounds, so that's 600, 1.2 million maximum, yeah? And they were given to universities, but the consortium had to have at least 2 SMEs. It was a way of bringing 2 SMEs together. And it was kind of small, and it usually wasn't high tech. For me, it was great. It gave me a way into doing research, but it built partnerships between SMEs. I worked on a number of them. I can only remember one. So there was a company called Jiffy Trucks. They still exist. I googled them just now. Yeah? And they made food trucks, which would drive around. And they drive around places like industrial estates, and they'd stop every now and again, and they'd open up, and you could buy sandwiches and soup and things like that. It's really an American concept. And this company customized trucks to make sandwich trucks. Not high tech at all, yeah? But they employed about 30 or 40 people. They started in the 70s. They still exist. They're employee owned now. But they needed to improve the design of their trucks. And they were looking for somebody who could build either a plastic or a fiberglass roof, partly to streamline the truck a bit more, which was a bit blocky. So we went out to industry. And this is IMI, and that's Del Monte. They were the two who came out kind of most active, yeah? The purpose of the grant was to solve an IMI problem and to solve a Del Monte problem. And we put that call out in universities applied, and the companies helped us decide who was awarded the grants. It turned out to be LaSalle on both occasions, didn't it? Oh, UP Las Vegas was one, yeah? The Del Monte one. And the companies put in, one of the companies put, it could have been kind, but one of them actually put cash forward, around, what, 2.5 million? 2.5 million pesos. If we had more money and more time, we could have done this several times over, in fact. And if you like, that's the pinnacle of growing the grant program. And again, people like Richard and other companies would mentor the partnership. They're just finishing now, aren't they? Any week now. Okay. These aren't the most important things I want to talk about. This is what I want to really talk about, because this is what we neglect. We tend to think that if we put opportunities out there for partnerships like we've just been talking about, that people will apply. Most of the time they won't. You've got to really push these things hard to reach all of your customers or clients, yeah? What you have to do to underpin that, before you do any of those things, do things like this. Go through the process of simply helping people make friends. They don't even have to do anything, yeah? Because we've been out in the regions, and we've done them out in the regions, yeah? So one or two of you may have even attended. Who has? Oh, you see friends, but you've been to one, yeah? Maybe. Okay. Sorry, just another thing. Okay. And the idea is, we invite a bunch of academics. That's easy, because they'll turn up to anything, yeah? And we invite a bunch of industrialists, and that's a bit harder. And so we tended to use people like local chambers of commerce, industry associations, and such like. So you need about 50-50 split. And the idea was it would either be based around a sector, and we've had sectors like supply chain in the electronics industry, Abaca, sugar something, disaster relief, all kinds of things, yeah? Or it could be a region. We didn't want to Palawan, there's no significant industry sector there, so we didn't want to put Palawan. And it's an opportunity to identify and discuss key issues. So in your region or in your sector, what problem would you solve tomorrow that you can't solve now? Yeah? Then we talk a bit about how would you do it, what's the obstacle? And the obstacle can't be money. You'll get people talking and finding out that this academic knew about what this industrialist wanted. At the time we were offering grants as well, so we had a bit of an incentive for them to collaborate. But it doesn't have to be the case. We've run, how many of these? 40, 50? Yeah? And hundreds of people have been. and they're great ways to get people talking to each other. And we used to describe it, you're going to meet people today you've never met before, you're going to make new friends, you're going to walk out the door holding hands with them, and you'll collaborate in the future sometime. That's all we expected. So sometimes we had grants to offer. This is something else in another country, paid for by USAID and delivered by us, RTI International. In El Salvador, they're trying to improve university-industry collaboration. So we helped the El Salvadorian authorities set up 4 industry higher ed clusters in 4 sectors. I can't remember what they are. It was a fairly formal process to do that, and it results in strategic and operational plans for each cluster. A bit more formal, a bit more rigid. When we let go of these clusters, I'm not sure what's going to happen to them. Some will work, some won't, I don't think. But it's another approach to get. We know about these people. And you all probably work with these kind of people. But the point is, we've got to know them well enough, particularly these two, Sapi and Namcham, and they've directly supported our innovation workshops, and we've done joint things. And isn't the innovation workshop